Without material manifestation, things can be just as real. Now, the material can respond to the psychic, so why can it not also respond to the spiritual? Chapter 5, A Nightmare and a Cataclysm 1. And now swiftly followed that hideous experiment which has left its indelible mark of fear on the soul of Marinus Bicknell Willett, and has added a decade, the visible age of one whose youth was even then far behind. Dr. Willett had conferred at length with Mr. Ward, and had come to an agreement with him on several points, which both felt the alienists would ridicule. There was, they conceded, a terrible movement alive in the world, whose direct connection with a necromancy even older than the Salem witchcraft could not be doubted. That, at least, 2 living men, and one other of whom they dared not think, were in absolute possession of minds or personalities which had functioned as early as 1690, or before was likewise almost unassailably proved, even in the face of all known natural laws. What these horrible creatures and Charles Ward as well were doing or trying to do seemed fairly clear from the letters and from every bit of light, both old and new, which had filtered in upon the case. And they were robbing the tombs of all the ages, including those of the world's wisest and greatest men, in hopes of recovering from bygone ashes some vestige of the consciousness and lore which had once animated and informed them. A hideous traffic was going on among these nightmare ghouls, whereby illustrious bones were bartered with the calm calculativeness of schoolboys swapping books, and for what was extorted from this centuried dust, there was anticipated a power and a wisdom beyond anything which the cosmos had ever seen concentrated in one man or group. They had found unholy ways to keep their brains alive, either in the same body or different bodies, and had eventually achieved a way of tapping the consciousness of the dead, of whom they gathered together. There had, it seemed, been some truth in chimerical old Borellus, when he wrote of preparing from even the most antique remains certain essential salts, from which the shade of a long-dead living thing might be raised up. There was a formula for evoking such a shade, and another for putting it down, and had it now been so perfected that it could be taught successfully, one must be careful about evocations, for the markers of old grays are not always accurate. Willett and Mr. Ward shivered as they passed from conclusion to conclusion. Things or presences or voices of some sort could be drawn down from unknown places as well as from the grave. And, in this process, also, one must be careful. Joseph Curwen had indubitably evoked many forbidden things. And as for Charles, what might one think of him? What forces outside the spheres had reached him from Joseph Curwen's day and turned his mind on forgotten things? He had been led to find certain directions, and he had used them, and had talked with men of horror in Prague, and stayed long with the creature in the mountains of Transylvania, and he must have found the grave of Joseph Curwen at last. That newspaper item and what his mother had heard in the night were too significant to overlook. Then he had summoned something, and it must have come. That mighty voice aloft on Good Friday, and those different tones in that locked attic lavatory. What were they like? With their depth and hollowness, was there any, not here, some awful foreshadowing of the dreaded stranger, Dr. Allen with his spectral bass? Yes, that was what Mr. Ward had felt with vague horror in his single talk with the man. If man it were, over the telephone. What hellish consciousness or voice, what morbid shade of presence had come to answer Charles Ward's secret rites behind that locked door? And that's one of the secrets, right? It's not really the dead, it's the shades of the dead. Those voices heard an argument must have it read for 3 months. Good God, was it not that just before the vampirism broke out, the rifling of Ezra Whedon's ancient grave, and the cries later of Pawtuxet, whose mind had planned the vengeance and rediscovered the shunned seat of elder blasphemies. Then the bungalow and the bearded stranger, and the gossip and the fear, the final madness of Charles, neither father nor doctor could attempt to explain, but they did feel sure that the minds of Joseph Curwen had come to earth again, and was following its ancient morbidities. Was demoniac possession, in truth, a possibility? Oh, people can choose such things. Allen had something to do with it, and the detectives must find out about one whose existence menaced the young man's life. In the meantime, since the existence of some vast crypt beneath the bungalow seemed virtually beyond dispute, some effort must be made to find it. Willette and Mr. Ward, conscious of the skeptical attitude of the alienists, resolved, during their final conference, to undertake a joint exploration of unparalleled thoroughness, and agreed to meet at the bungalow on the following morning, with valises and with certain tools and accessories suited to architectural search and underground exploration.